Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Maller Grotner Plummer Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Maller Grotner Plummer Attorneys, understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis, on the web at lawngp.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. Smithville, fiber internet, security solutions, and voice in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Bunger and Robertson, attorneys at law since 1949, utilizing experience, knowledge, and resources to help individuals and families recover in personal injury matters. Information at lawbr.com. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. After gaining total control of IU's 9 Board of Trustee appointments, Governor Mike Braun takes a swipe at the university.
All the other universities seem to have more value in terms of the education they're giving us for the cost.
Alumni leaders sent a letter to Braun questioning the takeover. With diversity, equity, and inclusion programs being cut at the state and federal levels, students of color are worried about what the future holds.
How can you not appreciate and support diversity or a diverse student body, for an example?
Indiana University has reorganized its DEI offices under the Student Life Office. And it's planting season in Indiana, and farmers are dealing with spring storms and economic uncertainties. We'll have these stories and more right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. When a last-minute change to the state budget, legislators gave the governor total control over membership of Indiana University's Board of Trustees. Asked about the changes, Governor Mike Braun questioned the value of an IU education. Ethan Sandwise reports.
26 alumni leaders and an elected trustee are criticizing the new rules, which end alumni trustee elections and allow the governor to replace elected board members at any point. The IU administration has not said whether it supports the changes. Braun said Wednesday he welcomes them and compared IU negatively to other universities in the state.
I wish it was paying more attention to what the other flagship university was doing, and that is given Hoosiers real value by keeping tuition, room and board to where you can afford it.
The IU administration has also not responded to Braun's attack.
All the other universities seem to have more value in terms of the education they're giving us for the cost, and those 3 trustees that were being arranged by just a small percentage of alumni didn't make sense to me.
While the governor now has authority to fire IU's 3 elected trustees, Braun said then that he hadn't thought about it.
I don't think their terms are that far away from expiring.
His team later reached out to Indiana Public Broadcasting saying, quote, "We are not committing to the elected appointments finishing their terms." For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Ethan Sandwise.
Braun also took exception with his Lieutenant Governor, Micah Beckwith, who recently called the 3/5 compromise a great move. Beckwith's remarks came after a debate over a bill banning diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in government referenced the 3/5 compromise, which counted slaves as 3/5 of a person for the purpose of representation in Congress. The Lieutenant Governor said the 18th century agreement helped ensure pro-slavery states wouldn't gain too much power.
I'm a believer that you better start thinking about what you're saying before it comes out. So I'll leave it at that.
Braun says Beckwith's comments made headlines the wrong way, which takes away from the substance of what you're trying to do in general. Diversity, equity, and inclusion remains a pressing issue in education, and as the Trump administration dismantles DEI programs, Aubrey Wright reports people of color are worried about their futures.
Frank Nguyen says he was the only Asian kid in school in Peru, Indiana. He connected with people from other cultures, but not so much his own Vietnamese heritage. He had very little Asian representation.
Being so separated from your culture, that's a big part of who you are, that can make you learn to hate yourself.
But when he came to Indiana University and saw its diversity, he wasn't an outcast anymore. He says he found belonging, his purpose, and love.
I just think that it's really important to be exposed to, your culture and other cultures because that's a way that you can learn to love yourself and love others.
The Asian American Association provides educational, social, and cultural events for all students. Wynn says the association's funding agreement with IU's Asian Culture Center is the reason why it can host these events for hundreds of students.
Yes, we are a social club and a community-centered club, but we also want to advocate and educate our members as well.
Founded in 1988, the center aims to promote Asian culture at IU. In addition to helping student groups, it collaborates across campus, as with Emerge, Asian American Art in Focus. IU quietly shifted culture centers out of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and restructured them under the Office of Student Life.
Has been very sneaky, has been very quiet. They don't want people to know that they are institutionally devaluing DEI at this school.
IU officials didn't comment. Lee says students want more transparency from the university as it makes changes related to DEI. It's sad for Lee, and she says IU should be considering student voices, especially as the Asian population grows.
Student organizations and DEI are the backbone of IU's campus and in determining the culture here.
Moving the Asian Culture Center is just one of the ways Indiana universities are reacting to anti-DEI policies. The Trump administration is investigating schools for racial preferences and launching an End DEI portal to report on, quote, divisive ideologies and indoctrination. Conservatives argue that DEI promotes reverse discrimination, diminishes merit, and emphasizes identity politics. That point of view prevails in state and national government. Meanwhile, organizations such as the Monroe County NAACP are growing concerned.
How can you not appreciate and support diversity or a diverse student body, for an example? How can you be against equity or fairness and to be included? I mean, how can you be against these things?
The Indiana Department of Education says it intends to follow federal orders to cut DEI in schools.
People are scared. They're just flat out scared and concerned.
While some colleges are making smaller changes, Ivy Tech Community College and Ball State University have closed offices. Schools could risk federal funding if they don't comply with orders to end DEI.
I think of Indiana University and other public institutions of higher education. I'll even include Ivy Tech in this group. They are under immense pressure from the funding stream provided by the state of Indiana.
To Bloomington High Schooler Winnie Dong, DEI benefits people who came to the U.S. for a promise of better opportunities and to escape persecution. She's skeptical of calls to replace DEI with purely merit-based initiatives.
If you're not looking at the individual, if you're not looking at those circumstances that they were in, if you're not looking at the person behind all their achievements, then what are you really doing?
She thinks different cultures are represented and appreciated in her school, but Dong believes if anti-DEI policies are enacted, the entire community might feel defeated. Ultimately, she says she doesn't want anyone to think that people who benefit from DEI are some kind of other that can be isolated and iced out.
We're humans, just like you and me. We feel. We might not have the same DNA, maybe, and we might not look all the same, but underneath all that skin, we're basically the same.
That kind of human connection through diversity is important for Wynn, too, because he says it teaches students to love, not hate. And it's why he's supportive of DEI in schools.
And it's so important for us to have education that's doing good. Education that is using humanity to teach and not using a mold.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Aubrey Wright.
Most college students report that their institutions do support free speech. According to Alumni Foundation and Gallup survey, about 75% of college students polled say they can freely share their thoughts and opinions on campus. The responses were the same regardless of political party, gender, and race. And the majority of students say they feel they belong on their campuses.
And I think that's really important because that's what higher ed's all about. It's about learning and sharing opinions and hearing other ideas from your fellow students.
Braun says the survey was inspired by protest over the war in Gaza and some horrifying stories in the news. She says while the media seem to portray colleges as silencing students, that's not how students feel. Well, we're joined now by Clayton Baumgarth for more headlines from across the state. Hi, Clayton.
Hey, Joe. Governor Mike Braun says his first 100 days in office has been a wonderful opening act. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Brandon Smith reports Braun reflected Wednesday on a legislative session in which the state budget saw major cuts and property tax reform that didn't go as far as Braun wanted.
A recent state revenue forecast created a $2 billion budget shortfall that lawmakers filled with tax hikes and major spending cuts. When asked how Hoosiers will be impacted by those cuts, Braun said he's optimistic about the economy.
And when it comes to what we really cut, nothing got hammered, and the most important stuff stayed intact.
The budget cut local public health funding from $150 million this year to $40 million a year. Braun says it's misguided to believe you have to spend more to improve health.
But don't interpret any of that as meaning that we're not going to pay a lot of attention to it.
Braun says his biggest win of the session was a slate of bills aimed at lowering health care costs, even as those bills were dramatically scaled back by the end of session. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Brandon Smith at the State House.
Improving government processes and financial accountability are among the top 2026 budget priorities for Bloomington City Council. Council members acknowledge that certain services may need to be cut or reduced due to the impending loss of property tax and local income tax revenues. That includes Bloomington Transit.
They get about $2.6 million from state, and they get $3.8 million from our lit, which is going to go away.
Council members will refine the list of priorities over the next few days before presenting it to the mayor's office. Bloomington's community radio station, WFHB, stands to lose 25% of its funding if the Trump administration's plan to rescind $1.1 billion to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting passes in Congress. The station recently received about $120,000 from the CPB Community Service Grant. WFHB's other main sources of funding are underwriting, individual donations, and local grants.
Things like health insurance are up for discussion on being on the chopping block.
The nonprofit radio station has 5 full-time employees and 3 part-time. It also has about 175 volunteers who produce news and public affairs, entertainment, and local music programming.
I grew up pre-internet in a small town, and radio was my connection to the outside world, and I understand its value, especially to young people.
WTIU and WFIU had their state funding cut and are also expecting to lose funding from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. A law firm hired by Indiana University concluded that rectal exams performed on players by former IU athletics physician Brad Bomba Sr. were unusual but not inappropriate, and they were done in a professional manner. Bomba Sr.'s conduct as a doctor for the IU men's basketball team is the focus of a lawsuit filed against the university by 5 former players. They characterized the rectal exams as sexual assault under the guise of medical care. They accuse IU of knowing about the invasive and unnecessary exams, but not intervening. Ivy Tech Community College has named Marty Polio as its next president. He'll take over in July, leading the statewide system, which enrolls about 50,000 full and part-time students. Polio is currently superintendent of Jefferson County Public Schools in Kentucky, which has more than 90,000 students. One challenge he'll be facing is Ivy Tech is losing about 5% of its state funding under the new budget. And finally, Indiana First Lady Maureen Braun is launching a fundraising initiative to keep the Dolly Parton Imagination Library going statewide. The launch comes more than 2 months after Governor Mike Braun cut $6 million in funding from the program, then tasked his wife with keeping it alive.
Having books in the home helps children do better in school and will benefit them throughout their lives.
And Joe, the Dolly Parton Imagination Library provides free books every month to children from birth to age 5.
Assume Dolly is happy that there's some hope the program continues here in Indiana.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Clayton. Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. It's spring planting season and farmers are dealing not only with storms, but an uncertain economic outlook. And thanks to an IU alum, a collection of rare Marvel Comics art was saved from the California wildfires. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
Asking tough questions to those in power.
Russia right now has you outmanned, outgunned. Is it time to think about a settlement?
As a newcomer to Congress, what did you make of the high degree of dysfunction within the Republican conference?
I always felt that it was broken.
And covering events as they unfold.
Opposition fighters have reached the suburbs of the capital, Damascus.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. Veteran journalist Carl Bernstein is serving as IU's Poynter Chair and Roy W. Howard Journalist in Residence this school year. Ethan Sandwise sat down with Bernstein, who, along with fellow Washington Post reporter Bob Woodward, exposed the Watergate scandal that brought down Richard Nixon 50 years ago. Here's some of that interview.
Carl Bernstein, thanks so much for joining me today.
Good to be here.
You said in the foreword of the latest edition of All the President's Men, your book on the Watergate expose, that Donald Trump is the first seditious president of the United States and that his actions leading up to January 6th and on that day constituted a threat to American democracy. Now we're almost 3 months into his next term as president. Has your appraisal of Trump changed at all since then?
Only the degree to which recklessness figures in the equation, as we're doing this interview a day after we almost had a financial collapse due to Donald Trump's recklessness. Extraordinary event, the chaos of which we could see through the day especially, and continue to see with the fallout from what occurred.
There's also quite a bit of appeal, right? I mean, Trump has a lot of staunch supporters who seem to kind of support this vision of a return to something that's, more original. I mean, do you have any insider speculation into like where this kind of desire comes from?
I think the important thing that we need to realize is that Trump's movement has tremendous width, depth in this country, that he has struck a chord with all kinds of people, and that basically half the country, in terms of adults of voting age, support and have continued to embrace, no matter how antithetical or outrageous his words and actions are, have continued to embrace him, elected him president with a majority of the vote, not quite the huge majority that he has claimed for this supposed huge mandate, but he has won the presidency, and his movement has changed us as a people. And whether we're going to go back is pretty doubtful.
When you came to IU in the fall and you sat on a panel and you had mentioned that the media as a whole had failed to report on Biden's mental state in the lead up to the 2024 presidential election.
I think one of the great historic failures of the press is the failure to adequately report on what reporters who cover the White House should have been covering, which is the president's apparent mental and physical decline, which they certainly had a view of and should have been spending more time on the story. And instead of attacking, as some reporters did, reports in right-wing media that went to the question of the president's condition. There's a cover-up of Biden's mental and physical decline.
We talked a little bit about or a lot about reporting at the national level, covering presidential politics. What does the state of local reporting look like right now?
We have lost in most towns and cities in America originally newspapers that had and even the succeeding online iterations of what were newspaper organizations. They've gone out of business in hundreds and hundreds of towns and cities across America. That local newspaper was the cohesion that held communities together. But there are great things happening now, though, in terms of nonprofits that are doing local news. The Texas Tribune, the most obvious example, which is maybe the best reporting organization in the state of Texas today, respected by thousands and thousands of readers and by people in the news business of all kinds of political, ideological persuasions. There's been a lot of attempts now to take that model, that nonprofit model, and bring it to other cities.
You can view the full interview on our website at WTIU.org. Planting season is here for many southern Indiana farmers. Crops such as corn and soybeans are going in the ground following severe spring weather while looking ahead to a tumultuous global economy. Tim Jagalow of member station WNIN has this report.
Hans Schmitz is with family-owned and operated Dutchman Farms in Posey County.
For checking seed depth, you're just taking a knife or an instrument that'll dig a little bit and going down into that row and trying to find a corn kernel.
He finds the bright pink corn kernel coated with fungicide and insecticide. This planter machine is operated by his Uncle Al, and it's more complicated than it looks.
So you've got 4 to 5 different instruments there, all in line, getting the row opened, getting the seed in, closing the row. Hopefully then we're putting it at the correct depth uniformly and uniformly spacing the seeds out.
Planting season for corn and soy is here for many area farms following tumultuous spring weather. Managers are also looking ahead to a tumultuous global economy.
So any global events affecting agricultural production will affect local pricing, and we always have to keep an eye on any potential black swan event to occur. So one of the more recent black swan events that really affected pricing locally was when Russia invaded Ukraine.
Both countries pulled their grain from the global market, increasing global demand while creating volatility. Tariffs are a mixed bag, currently at 145%.
If you look at 145% tariffs on China and China preparing to look elsewhere for soybeans, that has had a pretty direct impact on soybean prices right now.
He says they plant 30 to 40,000 corn kernels per acre and 130,000 seeds for soy per acre, in this case by Scott Dugan. As Schmitz checks for soybean soil depth, he'll also have to watch the world economy and weather conditions ahead.
And we just have to really be prepared to roll in the planting window that God provides.
For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Tim Jagalow.
Some of Marvel's most iconic comic book art, nearly lost in the California wildfires earlier this year, is now on display at IU. And as Maya Garza reports, IU alum Chuck Costas is to thank.
When the Palisades fire tore through Los Angeles, it destroyed Costas' home, but he managed to rescue original pieces by legendary Marvel artist Mike Zeck.
He is a very humble individual. I don't think he was drawing for the glory. And frankly, at the time, never even imagined that these things would be adapted into movies and television shows and become sort of the basis for the Marvel Universe.
Zeck's artwork helped define The Punisher, Captain America, and Secret Wars, now being adapted into 2 new Avenger films. He also designed Spider-Man's black costume, The Origin of Venom.
And I wanted this exhibit to showcase, more of the incredible work. When you see an original piece of artwork from a comic book creator like this, it can be so much more impactful than seeing what got printed on the page.
The exhibit is personal for Costas. It's housed at IU's McCalla School, where his father once attended elementary school and where Costas took fine arts classes as a student at IU.
We're going to continue to do additional events that tie into the exhibit. Some will be workshops, such as ways to do art. Some might be special talks. So be sure and come out now, but then also just keep an eye out on the calendar because we'll have other things coming.
Visitors can enjoy Zek's artwork, comics from IU's Ray Bradbury Center, and movie props from Costas' personal collection. They can even grab a copy of one of Zek's G.I. Joe comics from a bookshelf stocked with issues from Woodman's own collection. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Maya Garza.
That's the end of this program. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Maller Grotner Plummer Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Maller Grotner Plummer Attorneys, understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis, on the web at lawngp.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. Smithville, fiber internet, security solutions, and voice in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Bunger and Robertson, attorneys at law since 1949, utilizing experience, knowledge, and resources to help individuals and families recover in personal injury matters. Information at lawbr.com. And by WTIU members. Thank you.